because that's also the first object I did for this, so we're gonna look at that one. Cool. Like the proof of the orthographics. Cool. Alright. So it looks like the renders were missing. You had like the screenshots with the orthographics, but not the like lit renders. But yeah, so I mean, I looked at the block in shape, and I'm like, this definitely, it like wants to be a hammer, but it's not, perhaps not quite a hammer. Like obviously it's missing the little holes and stuff in the back here. So it looks like, and I'm not gonna compare this to the reference right now. But it looks like this edge like accidentally got shifted down when it perhaps wasn't supposed to be. So if I wanted to fix it and ensure that it was like totally straight with the top of this piece, I see bevels. Okay. I would just grab this vertex here, go into my move tool. I just hit W for the hotkey, and then I would use my vertex snapping. So you can either select it up here or just press and hold V, and then just snap this back up to this vertex up here, and do the same thing on the bottom. And now this is even with the top and bottom of the hammer. So it looks like, I mean, like this clearly wasn't meant to be smooth, but, so yeah, so I mean, over here, like there's a bit of overlapping geometry. So the first thing I would probably do is, just try to separate that, and I'm just sort of toggling between smooth mode and unsmooth mode to help me find where the edges are. I usually just drag things randomly until they kind of separate. And now, it might not be the correct shape at this point, because I was just like fiddling with it, but it's at least not clipping through itself. My general other rule of thumb is, if you have, like if you want to clip a button through an object or something like that, that's usually fine. Try to avoid the mesh clipping through itself if that's possible. So like the edges that were just there, like they were, you know, dragging through and like intersecting with the same mesh. You're into wireframe mode, you can see it's like punching a hole through it. That's just like another kind of thing to try to avoid. But yeah, so then ideally, I was like, I'm not going to go through and model a hammer, but like that is a thing that I could do in later classes if that was like a demo people were interested in. But yeah, like so ideally this would end up, all of this would sort of be connected together, because most hammers are usually made of like one metal object, which looks like it would be all of these pieces, and then one handle object. So ideally they would all be modeled together. If you wanted to make maybe just like really basically like the basic shape of a hammer, I'd probably start with a square S shape, and just be like, cool, maybe my hammer's like a little bit longer. Great. Actually, and then I would just add, I would start off with a few subdivisions, just because like from doing stuff like this, I know I would need them later. But what I'm going to basically try to do with this is start out like in the middle, make this flat part here, and then I'll take one end and basically turn that into the curved part, and take the other end and make it like the prongy bits at the end of the hammer. And just having those extra edge loops will make that ever so slightly easier. So what I'd probably do is, once I had those loops in, I would just make this whatever dimensions it should be for the edge of the hammer. And just take these spaces on the end. I'm just going to keep it kind of the same, like, rounded part of hammer on the left side. So I'll just extrude these down, scale these faces in a little bit, because most hammers kind of have, like, they have, like, that narrower bit before the head. I'll just do another extrude and be like, cool, here's, like, the handle looking, here's that narrow bit. We're going to go with it. This looks like a good hammer. And I'll extrude again. I'm just hitting G to repeat the extrude command, so I don't need to go up and click on the button every time. And then I'm just pressing R to access my scale tool. But yeah, so once that's done, so I want to transition this from being like a super square blocky hammer into something with a rounded head. So to do that, while I have these faces selected, I'm going to go up to my poly modeling tab and click on the circularize tool. It's like a square with a little, looks like a basketball in it, or you can find that in Edit Mesh Circularize. So when I click that, it's actually going to basically take all of the edge loops that you have here and convert them into something that is basically a perfect circle. They're all equidistant from each other. If you smooth this, it'll be a perfect circle. So maybe scale this up a little bit. And then I will extrude and be like, boom, here's the really awkward end of my hammer. So you'll notice that, like, this actually looks a little bit like a milk jug. If you ever need to make a milk jug, just do what I just did. Anyway, I do want to turn this into a milk jug now. I'm not going to, but anyway. But yeah, so you'll notice that, like, the end smooths, so it's, like, really rounded, and then this looks more square, a little bit like a milk jug. It's one of the beauties of the circularize tool. It's really nice for transitioning from, like, square to round areas. You don't need to worry about, like, trying to move all the edge loops so they're perfectly circular like that. Yes?
You were trying to make this look like a milk jug. You were to do like glass. Is there a way to texture something to make it look like glass on the bottom?
There is. You would have to use refraction for that. So a lot of Arnold shaders will actually have... I could try to render this. I have the red... Fun fact, if anyone ever gets the Redshift trial, it'll watermark your stuff, but if you take the file in and render it on a lab computer, it'll unwatermark it. But yeah, so if you're in like the Arnold standard surface shader, if you go down and select presets, usually they have one for, yeah, they have like glass and deep water. I found for some reason deep water usually behaves better for me, but like you could set that to deep water, like, oh, and just hit replace. And then if I'll just, for grins, I'll throw in a sky dome, and I will, this is going to be like the ugliest render ever, but I'm actually curious to see what it does, since there's no other objects in the scene. Yeah, so I mean, this is clearly very ugly. It's also for some reason rendering my hammer. Yeah, I mean, you can see, so like, it clearly render view will ignore the fact that I have isolate select turned on, so it was rendering these two objects flipping each other. But you can see that this guy here, which has the water texture, is like a sort of refractive surface. I'll go over that more later, but yeah, refraction's super fun. I like it. It will jack up your render times pretty aggressively, depending on how close you get to the object. But yeah, pretty much. You'd have to twiddle with the settings a little bit to find one that didn't like distort your screen too badly. But yeah, I mean, that's probably what I would do if I was doing that. So, you can. It does have options for. Where the heck? Yeah, no problem. I'm not gonna spend like super a lot of time on this. Wait. And by super a lot, I actually mean, usually when I do this, it's in Redshift, so I might just come back to this and demo this at a later time. We're actually doing rendering. Okay. Sorry. But yeah, so, right. So if I wanted to like make these little prong bits at the back of the hammer. What I could do is actually go through and just like harden out the edges of this hammer really quick. It'll actually give me a few more edge loops in here that I can work with to actually pull out the back little prongs. So I will go in and just really quick, just harden this thing out. What are you clicking on? Yay. Cool. So now if I smooth this, it should be This area should be a bit harder. Cool. Alright, so now I have like a rough, you know, hammer shape kind of thing. What I'm going to do is throw in another edge loop. So actually, I'm going to use the offset edge loop tool here. So basically what I want is just like a buffer edge loop between the faces that I'm about to extrude and pull out of the back of this. So remember how I said the insert edge loop tool, if you click on an edge loop and use the insert edge loop tool, it'll put the loop perpendicular to the loop that or the edge you clicked on. The offset edge loop tool will put the edge loop parallel and will add 2 of them. So it's really, really good. So if you go into Mesh Tools, Offset Edge Loop Tool, just click on this loop, and it'll place an edge as equidistantly as it can on either side of this. So then you have sort of this odd shape here. So to make the little nubs, I'm just going to select these guys here, and I'm just going to like extrude these out. This is the part where I'm going to stop paying attention to like the form of the object and if it looks reasonable. And literally all I'm doing is just like extruding these faces out repeatedly. Ooh, I selected an area on the bottom. Cool. And I'm just going to keep scaling these, and then you get something that kind of resembles, perhaps, a hammer, like so. So I did the thing where I wasn't paying attention to what I was selecting at the bottom of my object. So I'm just going to delete all of these faces, and I'm just going to fill that hole with Mesh Tools, append to polygon. I'll click on my edges and be like, boom, my hole is fixed. But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much how I would make a hammer. If I wanted to go in, so like you'll notice when I added all those loops, it pretty much destroyed the look of the nice rounded edge over here. So let's go back and grab those edge loops. And I will use my circularize tool again, just clicking on the little poly modeling button. All of these laboriously. And then it's not great, but it'll work. And then that pretty much will round that out again. And then I would extrude from there. So if I was making like the head of a hammer, that's more or less how I would do it. I would pay attention more to the shape, but yeah. So any questions on this? Yes. Sure. Let's see. What happens? I'll do the back of the hammer out of this bottom of the hammer, because it's pretty much the same thing. So I just selected the faces that I wanted to like come out as like the little back nubs. So I'll grab these guys, and I'll just go up to my extrude tool, extrude, drag that out a little bit, and then I just sort of scaled as I went to maybe like shape them a little bit as I go. I'd hit G to extrude again, and just sort of keep dragging them out and shaping them with literally just with the extrude and the scale tool. That's like the bread and butter of how I usually model. That answer your question? Cool. If you continued in this fashion, you could make some kind of ridiculous throwing star shape. I almost want to save this and animate it. Like, it feels like these are like little chicken legs. Wait. I can't help myself. I'm just gonna like throw this onto my desktop as an OBJ really quick. Close enough. Alright. Yeah, and then for the handle, I would do more or less the same thing as the back of the hammer. I might start with like a cylinder and just sort of add edge loops and scale and extrude them as necessary to make what am I doing? To make like a different shape. Like you could, you know, just like add some edge loops, scale them in like this for if you need like a lump in it. But yeah, so that's the hammer. Any questions on this before I move on to a different project? Cool. Any volunteers, or am I picking another random one? Cool. What are your initials? DRK. Thank you. Nice. Oh, nice. No flashlight. Cool. Alright. so here's the flashlight in question. This is an industrial-looking flashlight. Holy crap. And then the renders. I think it might have been nice if the renders were like possibly like a dark gray. It's really hard to see. I think that's also just like a function of the lighting. It's not huge. I can totally see you put the detail and stuff in there. Let's see here. Buttons. Version 2, I take it? Yeah, cool. Significant increase in file size there. Okay, I see what you did. Alright, cool. I'm gonna assign these, I'm just gonna give these guys a Lambert 1 so it's easier to see. Yeah, so I mean, it looks like, do it. Yes. So it looks like you actually modeled this to be smooth modeled and then went to like mesh smooth and smoothed it. Is that?
I did so much stuff I probably don't remember.
Okay. That's fair. I mean, I look at this, it looks like, I am like 97% sure that you modeled this with like, to hit the 3 key and then you just added the extra subdivisions. Like, I look at that and that's what it looks like in the topology. So I mean, I look at this, the topology looks good. Like the way you bumped all these like weird little nubby guys out, looks good. It doesn't, I don't see any n-gons off the top of my head. So it looks like done nice with the quads. I missed a guy. One. Is this this is like the little, yeah, okay, oh yeah, okay. If you ever wanted to go back and like make this super fancy, you could totally add like a little buttonhole for this in the back, if that exists. I can't. Was it actually there in your pictures? I don't remember.
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Maybe. Yeah. So it looks like there is some kind of little ridge. Like you could add that in if you wanted to. I mean, I think the cutouts on the side pretty much fill the difficulty of this particular assignment, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this looks pretty reasonable. Obviously, if you, so like, this would be one of the worst possible objects to have to smooth. Like if you did want to look at this in smooth mode, like so hit 3, it looks like every once in a while there's like a little bit of weird topology happening with like some extra faces. Yeah, there's this face here. If I unsmooth this, you can't see it. It's because it's occupying the same. It's like so flat. It's like in the same space as all of these edges, which looks like just sort of a function of however you've made these little things, or like an extra extrude that was in there that just never got shifted away. If that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think overall this is pretty good. Yes. Mm-hmm. This one? Oh, this. Oh, okay. It looks like pretty much just flat cutouts. Right. Yeah. So one thing you could conceivably do. Ooh, what? Anyway, cool. Wait, what were we trying to do here?
So, like, I was trying to figure out how to, like, do that part.
Oh, okay.
At some point, that's so jacked up, I want to remove all the faces.
I see. Yeah. Alright, so if you ever wanted to go back and repair this, just get rid of this giant n-gon from hell here. And then it would leave you with like this little ridge here. And then you could just do a bridge, like just grab this edge loop here and this edge loop, and do an edit mesh bridge. Perfect! I love when it breaks it, now I can demo how to fix it. So see how it connected, like, kind of the wrong faces together? Like, you expect this one to go to this one, and it does not do that. There's a dumb hack to fix that. And it pretty much is literally just like, grab your append to polygon tool, add in a single edge loop, or a single face. You don't need to go around and like do this for all of them. And then if I double click this and just deselect the ones on this little face I added, you should be able to go in again and do a bridge, and this time you can see everything is added reasonably into said bridge. I don't know for the life of me why Maya decides to sometimes like twist your bridge really aggressively, but pretty much adding this little polygon here acts as a stopper so that like can't do that. So if you ever find your bridge tool behaving awkwardly, try just like adding in 1 or 2 polys manually with the append to polygon tool and then retrying bridge. Questions on that? Cool. Yeah, so I mean, the really bad hacky way that I would suggest to do this, which I don't actually recommend per se, cough, if you take a square or like whatever shape, select this part of the flashlight, then select the object. You could do a mesh Boolean difference, and it'll make a little cutout. It does not do nice things to your topology. You can see by doing that, it created like a giant n-gon. It gets the shape right, but it just makes a giant n-gon in your piece. But yeah, so like I said, I don't necessarily recommend using Booleans, mostly just because they'll really mess up your topology and shamelessly add n-gons into your pieces. In this case, though, I'm actually, you know what, I'm just gonna get rid of this edge loop in the verse. Because I don't really feel like messing with it right now. But like one thing you could conceivably do. I'm trying to decide. So you could, I would probably do this. I would do one of 2 things. I would go in with my, what the heck, the multi-cut tool, and I would literally like draw that shape in wherever it should be, which is just like an awful solution. Like I can't think of any possible worse way to spend my time. And then I basically just like get rid of these edge loops and fill in the hole. What you could do in this instance, interestingly, since this, I'm assuming that this piece here was not designed to be smooth, so it's supposed to be low poly just because these are square, and if I smooth it, they get really weird and nubby. I'm going to treat this like a low poly game model, or like a model for 3D printing. So what I'm going to do, it's going to be really, really bizarre. I'm going to do it, n-gons. Oh, the n-gons. Alright, I'm going to fix this n-gon. I'm just going to grab the face, extrude, and then merge to center. It'll turn them into tries. So what I'm actually going to do is take this square, and I'm going to hold down D to move the pivot, V to vert snap, and I will snap that pivot to the center of this this object here. What this will do when I rotate the cube, it'll pretty much keep it in a perfect circle going around the outside of this flashlight. There is a handy tool, in case I didn't show it to you guys. It's Edit Duplicate Special, or Control-Shift-D, whichever. So if you open the tool settings for this, you can actually, I think I demoed this with the class because I did the spool holder, but in this case, what I want to do is basically generate 5 additional copies of this square and have them spaced equally around this cube. So I'm just going to set the translate back to 0. Ignore this stuff for now, you just want copies, you don't need instances. And then for rotate, I want 60-degree increments and 5 copies to be made. So if I apply this, it should cover the outside of this in spheres, or in my square copies. What? Oh, I see. I did something weird to my square, but that's okay. So any questions about how I got the squares duplicated like this? So what I'm actually going to do, because I'm lazy and I don't want to do like 7 bools on this object, I'm just going to take all of these squares and do a mesh combine so that they are now one object. If I click on one, it selects all of them. I just deleted the history on that. You don't really need to, but I did. So I'll take my object, select this weird flower shape of cubes, and do mesh, booleans, difference, and it pretty much cut out. I mean, you could take more care of the shape it's actually cutting out, but it cut out. Okay. Booleans are weird sometimes. I'm actually going to separate this, and I will just do them individually. So it'll cut it out. So I have this object and it's just like chopped out, chop this out. And then I'll grab one of these guys over here that like didn't behave the way I expected. Oh, okay. Booleans are a little weird. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. Apparently, if you combine your objects, half of them will not work. And if you separate your objects, they're all fine. So, who knows? So, again, the Booleans kind of destroyed my topology. Like, you'll notice that this whole thing is basically covered in n-gons now. Like, all of these are just giant n-gons. For the most part, like, the original stuff from the model isn't too bad. It's either all quads or tris. If I wanted to fix these n-gons, the sort of hackiest way to do it with a minimal effort is to go to mesh, cleanup. Pretty much I usually ignore most of these options. You just want to check under the Fix by Tessellation tab, faces with more than 4 sides. So what this is going to do is it's pretty much going to triangulate anything that's not already triangulated. So in the case of this n-gon, it's going to break everything down into tris. So once I apply this, like, the topology is hideous looking. Like, this is not good topology. If I had to, for some reason, add an edge loop in here, there's, like, no way I'd be able to go back in and do that. But if it's, like, the last thing you do on your object, it's, like, kind of not the worst thing ever, depending on the circumstance. I don't know. I mean, that's probably how I would cut those into this object, since you don't need to smooth it. To reiterate again, if you are smoothing your object with the 3 key, for the love of God, do not use booleans on it. If it's a low poly game object, you can kind of get away with booleans. Just make sure you clean up the resulting n-gons and whatever weirdness they might do to your topology. Anyone have questions on that? Cool. Also, for the record, many people, and by people I mean like other instructors here at Drexel, super despise booleans. I despise them less because I am more familiar with game modeling probably than a lot of the anim professors, and also I use them like all the time for 3D printing because topology doesn't matter in the slightest. So like if it gets me the shape I need for a 3D print, fine. But yeah, just be aware that if you use booleans poorly or perhaps in front of other professors, you will be harassed. But yeah, so I guess were there any questions on the rest of this model? Cool. So I think I'm actually going to, we can come back and do some more crits at the end of class, but I want to make sure that I get through the NERB stuff that I have to teach you guys today. So